Recently, we've been covering a number of episodes that involve Will Smith and Chris Rock and the incident that occurred at the Oscars where Will Smith goes up on stage and slaps Chris Rock. Since that time, a number of other incidents have occurred in the comedy world. I thought it might be useful not only to talk about the incidents, which we'll briefly review, also, though, to really talk about how comedians are handling these scenarios, what they're doing to bounce back, because we can learn something as leaders from them about resilience strategies. The most recent incident that occurred that I want to mention happened during the Hollywood Bowl during the Netflix is a Joke Festival, and it involved comedian Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle was on stage and he was doing part of his show, and a man rushes up on the stage, attacks him, knocks him over. Prior to the security guards rush on the stage, they end up apprehending the man and taking him into custody. He ultimately has to go to the hospital because of his injuries from getting beaten on the stage, really, by the security staff. And it turns out that this man was a 23-year-old who also had a makeshift kind of a weapon. It looked like a gun, but it was really a replica gun, yet it did have a way that you could press a button and a knife would come out from that weapon. Whether he intended to use it on Dave Chappelle or not, we don't know. It was certainly a potentially dangerous situation in any case. In that moment, Dave Chappelle manages to get up from the floor and to continue his routine, even with all the mayhem going on around him, even with the security staff still on the stage. And of course, the audience in the midst of all of this, you could hear gasps from all over the room as people were just couldn't believe that this was happening. Also, both Chris Rock and Jamie Foxx, who were present, they also lent some support as well. Chris Rock was famous for saying, "Was that Will Smith who came up?" And again, using their humor to deflect the situation. And Jamie Foxx that day, when he came up on the stage, happened to be wearing a sheriff's hat. And they did some things, said some things that were kind of funny to also help calm down the crowd that night as well. So when I think about all of these situations and scenarios and circumstances that are going on, I believe that there are some lessons we can learn from them. And so I want to mention what some of those are in just a moment. I also want to acknowledge that following this incident, Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock appeared at a secret LA comedy show some days later. Another show was scheduled to air that day. However, the venue posted a note that, there would be a surprise guest. Nobody knew who was going to be on the stage. All kinds of celebrities, though, started buying tickets, and people showed up because people kind of thought, well, I wonder if Dave Chappelle is going to be there at this event or not. And it turns out the two of them, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, sat on the stage. They did talk about the Will Smith incident. They talked about this incident with this 23-year-old assailant named Isaiah Lee. They told jokes about it. In Dave Chappelle's case, he said to Chris Rock, he says, well, at least you got attacked by a celebrity. And in my case, it was a homeless man who had leaves in his hair. And so they had some repartee going back and forth between them on this series of incidents. Later on, Kevin Hart appeared on the Jimmy Kimmel show. And the night that he was a guest on the Jimmy Kimmel show, there was a guest host, Mike Birbiglia, and Mike was talking to Kevin about this incident as well as other situations. And Kevin Hart said something that on the surface seemed quite controversial. He said that, he was glad this incident happened with Dave Chappelle and that it was necessary. And so you could see that Mike was very taken aback by him saying this. Is like, well, what do you mean by that? And it comes out, and what he says is that we don't want to be in an era where people get the idea that it's okay to jump on the stage and to attack the entertainer. This incident with Dave Chappelle, because the security staff took such a hard line with him, this man had injuries at the end of this altercation. And so Kevin Hart said, yeah, we need to have an incident so that not everybody in the world thinks, oh, I should go up on the stage and do the same thing. So he felt that that response might serve as a deterrent from future incidents. So when we think about all of this and we think about everything that has transpired over the last so many weeks, there are 5 lessons that I want to bring out that we can learn from comedians in diffusing tough situations and possibly even dangerous situations. Number 1, you can diffuse hot situations with humor. When we think back to the Chris Rock Will Smith incident, certainly that's what Chris Rock did. He recovered and went into some humorous quips about what happened on the stage. Similarly, Dave Chappelle did the same thing. And then later on, Dave and Chris Rock in their show continued to raise the humor piece of what happened. Now, I'll say this: humor very often can be an antidote to some of the other emotions you could feel in the moment. You could become so angry that then you take additional actions that make the situation worse. It's kind of difficult to be in a totally angry and vengeful and attack mode when you're laughing and expressing humor. So when we think about the workplace, there are times when it could be beneficial to bring some humor and levity to a tough situation, again, to diffuse it and to be able to make it less volatile than it otherwise might be. Number 2, literally roll with the punches. Sometimes punches are going to come at you, and rather than hit back and make things worse, like in an Aikido move, you move with it and roll with the punches. In the martial art of Aikido, when someone hits you with a hard punch, you take that energy from the punch, you take that and you deflect it and you move it in a direction where you would like to go. Well, comedians are very good at this. They're very good at taking the energy in the room and deflecting it to a new and different and safer place. So I would say number 2, roll with the punches, is a good one. Number 3, communicate. It's important to communicate and get the backstory behind the front story and find out more about what's going on. In Dave Chappelle's case, the night of the incident, he convinced the police authorities to allow him to talk to his assailant. And when he had the opportunity to talk to his assailant, he asked him, why did you do this? What was the motivation behind it? And what he learned is that the assailant was very upset because his mother was being evicted from her Brooklyn apartment because the neighborhood had been taken over through a gentrification move, as happens in many communities and neighborhoods across the country. As neighborhoods become gentrified, those people with less means and less resources can no longer afford to live in the neighborhood, and then they're forced to relocate and forced to leave. And very often they have no place to go and certainly can't go to a place that they can afford at that point with whatever they have been paying, from the past. So he was very upset about that, wanted to bring a little more attention to that issue. And of course, not that this was an appropriate way to bring attention to it. Of course, it was not. And what Dave Chappelle also perceived was that this person may have had some mental issues and some mental problems as well that may have been driving it. He didn't have to take the time to talk to the guy and find out what the situation was and what occasioned it. Was the man mad with him, upset with him for some reason? A joke he had told in the past? What was the motivation? And so he wanted to find out. So that communicate piece is important. Don't assume that you know what other people are thinking or what else may be going on in their minds behind a circumstance. Now, even though he spoke to the man at that time and he had police and security protection around him, there is an order such that the assailant must maintain a 100-yard distance from Dave Chappelle at all times. So he's taking proper precautions at the same time, yet he took the time to speak with the man to find out what the backstory was. Number 4, I would say help each other. Comedians who were present, Chris Rock and also Jamie Foxx, stepped on the scene to help. Just like with the Chris Rock incident, we found that actor Denzel Washington stepped in to provide some help, and so did Tyler Perry as well at the Oscars. So sometimes we just need some people to roll with us, to be there to encourage us, to calm us down in the situation, to calm down other people in the situation, and to remind us of the bigger realities that are important. So get some help, help others in these tough situations. Number 5, I would say, don't let negative situations destroy your success. When Dave Chappelle had this incident at the Hollywood Bowl, he had been wildly successful for the 3 days of this event and had really been a crowd favorite, putting him in the top echelons in the comedy world. How he was going to respond this night after this assault could either ruin all of that success or leave it in place and possibly elevate it and catapult it because of how he chose to respond. He chose to take the higher road, use his humor to deflect in the situation, to diffuse in the situation. And as a result, he still gets to enjoy being at the top and the pinnacle in his craft as a comedian. We've been talking a little bit about the application of these 5 principles that we can learn from comedians, maybe on altercations that might occur in the individual workplace. However, there's also a broader application, and that broader application comes into play, let's say, when your company might be under attack from a competitor. Let me give an example. If you've got a competitor out there that's saying some things about you that are inappropriate or showing up in the marketplace in a way that's problematic, you could effectively use humor to diffuse and deflect the situation and, in fact, draw some positive attention to your own organization. So think about humor as a very powerful and a very effective marketing tool in a tough scenario. Most companies would often get into what I call the online shouting matches or tit for tat, and then both entities look bad. However, if someone is your competitor and showing you up in a negative light, you can be the victor by using humor instead. Another place where this might be useful and effective is, let's say your company comes under another kind of an attack. Let's say it's a cyber attack or something of that nature. That causes tremendous disruption and havoc internal to your company. Tensions are high. People may have lost data. People may be upset. You can use humor inside the organization to get people to remember that this too shall pass, to get them to remember that you will get through this season, even if it's tough for now. It won't remain tough forever. And that's an important perspective. Humor sometimes allows us to remember that whatever the pain is, it's not permanent. We're moving through the pain whatever it may be. To society, what I would say is that, yes, when people engage in inappropriate behavior, as Kevin Hart would say, there need to be consequences. And good, there were some consequences for the man who stepped on the stage with Dave Chappelle. Clearly, there are the consequences that everyone witnessed, which was he really got a beat down on the stage. And then, of course, he's now facing a number of misdemeanor charges as well about this incident. You must take action so that others know that this is not behavior that's tolerated or that will be tolerated or that is appropriate and or effective. When I think about the implications for leadership, I believe that we have to remember when you are in the public eye, and that's as a business leader or as any other kind of leader, you could be an athlete, a comedian, people are watching you and people are imitating, copying, and following what you do. So whether you like it or not, you are a leader. And you don't want to engage in behavior that others may copy that's inappropriate. Now, I will say we can copy using humor in a difficult situation. We can copy rolling with the punches. We can copy communicating and finding out more about what's disturbing those who may be reaching out in an inappropriate way. And we can provide help to one another in tough scenarios and move forward into our success without allowing these incidents to knock us off balance. We can all do that. As we close today's segment, I want to leave you with a couple of Bible verses that talk a little bit about humor. And these come from Proverbs, the 15th chapter. The first verse is the 13th verse. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart, the spirit is broken. And then verse 15 of the same chapter, Proverbs 15, all the days of the afflicted are evil, but he who is of a merry heart has a continual feast. And here's what I want to remind you of. We can't always choose our circumstances, the circumstances that we find ourselves in. However, we do get to choose our response to the circumstance. And we get to choose whether we stay in a place of sorrow of heart or broken spiritedness, or if we move forward with a merry heart to the continual feast, because we can set the table for the feast that we want to enjoy personally in our individual lives, as well as at work and in the company. So if you are a leader, you can be the one to set the table for a merry heart, no matter what's going on in your organization.